Akhil, unmute yourself.
Hello everybody. Today we have a very important session on one of the most important domains in VLSI chip design. It is the static timing analysis, or STA as we call it. Today we have Atit Mishra with us. Atit has been with NXP for over 17 years now. He is a senior design manager and has been involved in more than 15 plus tape outs during his course of the career. So Atit, please go ahead and share your presentation and brief us about STA. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Hello guys. Good evening, good morning. Thanks for joining. So we will be starting the presentation on the STA topic, and like before that, let me know once my screen is visible. So give me a minute. Is that the screen is visible?
Yes, Atit, it's visible.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody, please mute yourself.
स्ट्रेटजी करता था प्लेयर बिल्कुल उसका.
Okay, so let me begin the presentation. So see, I will be sharing my desktop. So in case anything expected, from me to be, operating over Teams, or if required, like if it is required for me to see any comments, so please do let me know. I'll switch over to the Teams window. So okay, so moving back to the today's agenda, basics of STA. So let me begin with that. So basics of STA, I mean, we all understand STA, it's static timing analysis, and that is one of the key to the timing convergence for any SOC. And in this presentation, we would be going from that, how a timing constraints are the key for a design closure, and then how we proceed with timing closure followed by a timing sign off, which ends up to a high performance silicon and ultimate goal for which the whole VLSI industry is striving for. So again, just summarizing the agenda before we move further. So we'll be talking about what exactly STA is. Like, we'll be starting from the very basics, followed by physical design flow, how and where the STA is integrated in the backend flow. Then, first of all, before moving to constraints and those complex topics, we'll be talking about the STA fundamentals and how, how those fundamentals are linked to a flow. Then we will move to the important topic of timing constraints generation and what are those basic components. Then timing convergence, how we utilize all these collaterals and constraints and how we achieve the timing convergence. Then we'll be talking about the next generation future NPI. I mean, the current level of SOCs, they are so big in size that we need to do a hierarchical timing closure and how we address it in a basic scheme of things. Okay. So I'm moving further. So we have approximately 60 slides, and we will be covering in next 1.5 hours. So feel free to stop me if there is any quick question. I can take it at that same time. I'll take it there. Otherwise, we will be having a 15-20 minutes of Q&A session as well at the end. Okay. So I'm moving to static timing analysis, and I think this is one of those first thing I always talk about. That STA is a method of validating the design performance by checking all the possible combination of things, all combination of paths in the design, everything which can result into a timing need of the design, right? And being static, so it is important to understand what do we mean by static. Static means we are going to check all the possibilities in the design, which is indirectly helping us to run faster while doing these simulations in the design, compared to the dynamic simulation where it is more use case driven, and it will be programming driven, it will be software driven, where things will really be toggling from 0 to 1, 1 to 0, and propagating to all the flops, right? So we need not to simulate all the logical operation in the design. That is why STA is fast. And so wherever there is a possibility of 1 or 0, without going in details, we assume it for both. So I'll come to this point again and again while we'll be discussing those STA fundamentals as well. So that we will be covering everything that defines the static behavior, right? Okay. And then, why timing information is required. So timing is ultimately required to have those delay dimensions added to the ASIC designs, right? So while you are writing the codes, we are simulating it without delays. It is more of a functional verification where we are, where we are concluding that yes, design will work, assuming a zero delay. But the STA will act. Will that design work when there will be a practical, timing dimension associated with that? So that's how it is. It is the added value in the whole design cycle. Okay. So how it is done? So I mean, it is done. So first of all, it is very critical to be able to create a timing environment which is equivalent to a design functionality. And that timing environment is defined by some set of rules we will be defining as a part of timing constraints. These timing constraints are equivalent to STA modes. I have highlighted this because these are those terminologies that you will keep on hearing. That timing constraint I am making for a particular mode, that's a functional use case. It could be some use case number 2 where for which you will be defining timing constraints. So that defines the backbone of STA. Okay. Then further, it is also important to understand your working condition. When I say working condition, we meant under which condition your chip is going to be working, right? It could be a car, that is being driven in those northern atmosphere where the temperature is -20, or it could be in the heated conditions where the temperature is even plus 150 C, right? So you need to understand your working environment, and accordingly we will be configuring and simulating our environment. And while we are simulating our environment, not only from the temperature conditions, as I explained, it could be the process conditions, under which condition the fabs are generating the silicon, and fabs are manufacturing their silicons. There will be some bad processes, there will be some good processes. So all those PVT conditions under which your chip is going to work will be modeled as a timing sign-off criteria that includes the corner definitions. So we will be calling those terms as corners, right? Timing corners. That defines the working condition of the chip. Then at the last, we also would like to master the ability to achieve the best performance out of the design that we are claiming as an art of timing convergence. You must have heard the setup path, hold path, how I can optimize these paths for a better performance, or how I can fix hold violations. So all these are the timing optimization technique that guarantee the application and the working of chip under those conditions. Okay. Now coming to physical design flow. So let's see how in physical design flows things are linked. So I think you must have heard about these teams. I mean, there will be an STA team inside any organization. There will be a synthesis team, APR team. So synthesis, APR, STA, these are those teams which has a key role to play while you have converted your RTL into the actual netlist, and then you are physically implementing it. Well, we have a front-end team. We have similarly front-end. We have IP teams which are coding the RTLs of the legacy IPs and next generation IPs, which FE team is integrating. Then we have a DFT team as well, right? Design for test team. They are responsible for driving the testability of that whole chip. Every chip that goes to customer, before landing to customer, it is first tested for its for all the possible issues that is there with the individual chip. When I say the testing is done, it's not done for like once in a process. Every chip handled to the customer is tested before we deliver it to customer. So these are those interfaces, where the STA team goes and talk. How it goes is, so first of all, STA team needs that mode understanding, that use cases of the design. It could be a front-end application driven thing, or it could be that how to model the timing when we want DFT team to be able to test their hardware before delivering it to customer, right? So there will be n number of modes for which we need to write the timing constraints, right? We would like to simulate the chip under all the possible conditions, be it DFT modes, be it front-end modes, and even in front-end there could be multiple design use cases, right? There could be a very high frequency mode where you have a couple of applications running. There could be another frequency mode where some of the extra devices are active. We need to time it like that. All those things we are claiming as a discussion based things that happen between front end and the DFT. where we understand what are my modes requirement. Further, STA team, convert them into the form of a timing constraint that we just discussed, right? For every mode, there will be a timing constraints, and using those constraints that we'll be talking about in the upcoming slides, we will be, implementing the design, right? And the moment we implement the design, there will be some collaterals being generated. So there will be collateral generated. I'll be coming to these. That what is this .v and .spef? When we say .v, it's basically the netlist, the gate level netlist. Spef is the net extraction that is needed for timing the path. So it will be feedback to STA. Now then STA plays a critical role in defining the timing sign-off that yes, everything is working and it is simulated to the highest frequency. And as a step back verification, we also provide certain those models back to DFT and front-end team who have already done that, they have confirmed that my RTL models will be working fine without delay. Now we are feeding back them SDF that now simulate the whole environment using these delays as well. Your environment should be working. So that is we are we call it as a GLS, gate level simulation, which is done by using SDF. Okay. So that is the overall physical design flow, how things are linked around STA. Now, timing convergence with STA team. So when I say what is the role of STA, it is all in between those cycles. So you can claim that I hope you are familiar with these steps. These are the basic steps of the backend implementation, where first it is a synthesis where we are converting RTL into netlist. And then after that, the netlist is physically placed on the tools, which involves the placement of the logic in the simulated environment in the tools, followed by clock tree synthesis and then routing of all those layers wherever required, followed by a noise sign off. Now, if I would like to place STA's role, it's basically it is with being associated with the physical design team, that whether at every design stage my timing is in control or not, whether we'll be talking about those uncertainties and design margins which are needed. But then at every stage we would like to be assured that not in the very end we are seeing things as a surprise that things cannot be met, we cannot meet those desired performance in the design. So at every design stages, STA team will be plugged into the physical design team, just to be able to provide the timing analysis feedback on time. Okay. So next, I think it is time to first go through the basic fundamentals of STA, because so what we have done so far, it's more of a how team is linked to the various teams in the organization. So now I think it is time to talk about the STA fundamentals. Okay. Talking about timing collaterals, I think we discussed about a timing path, how it looked like. Then we'll be talking about delay calculations. Then timing path, how a path look like, what is setup, what is hold. Pretty basic, but I mean it's always good to refresh it. And I'm assuming that by the end of this session we will be an expert of these topics. What is recovery and removal. Then clock gating, how clock gatings are responsible for saving power, and what is to be checked in STA for avoiding glitch. Then terms like latency, skews, early late concepts. So all these concepts we'll be talking. What is corner? I think we just discussed in brief, and then what is mode? We will be talking about all these things. Okay. Now coming to timing collateral portion. See, I think this is a pretty handy diagram that people have been I think used to it in the very first or second years of university programs, right? So all we have is a good amount of combination logic between the two flops, right? So what we need is cell definition and what is the connectivity between those cells, right? That is coming from your netlist, right? What else do we need? We need the internal delay information of these cells, right? These are the libraries which are received by the library designers, where they are ensuring that every such arc within every cell has a certain amount of delay, and we would like to know those know these delays. Only then we will be able to time the path. So these delays are coming from the .lib files, .liberty files, which we are getting from the library teams. Okay. As soon as I get to know about these delays, I can time the particular path, right? Second is the net delay. So net delays are nothing but the interconnect delays between those cells, right? these net delays are coming from the SPEF. So I think we just talked about a dot SPEF or a dot V kind of letters. So dot SPEF provides you the net delays that are associated with that path. And the next important thing is constraints. See, the moment we apply a constraints, we are telling tool that these are the two flops triggered by a same clock, and now they're eligible to have a flop to flop timing, right? So as soon as I define this red mark as a clock, tool will automatically know, okay, there's a clock in, there's a clock at the capture, I need to time this flop to flop path, right? So SDC is an important collateral that is to be added for the timing analysis. Okay, so that was pretty basic in how we end up timing certain timing paths in the design, right? And for example, we have just shown you one particular path. What we are talking in an SOC, there could be billions of paths with complex muxings in the clocking as well as in the data path, right? So it is not just one path we are talking, there could be millions of paths in the design. Okay, that is just as a sample shown here. So delay calculation. So what do we, how the delay is calculated, right? So this is the very basic diagram where a cell 1 is connected to cell 2, and then there will be a net delay, right? So this just give me a minute if I could locate my pointer. Okay, somehow I'm not able to locate my pointer, but it's okay. Fair. So again, delay from pin Z to A, right? That delay will be modeled inside a SPEF like a RC network, where individual net segment will have some R and C network, right? Those R and C network will be sorted out, and those delays are converted in the form of a delays inside SPEF, right? And then that was on the net delays. Now how cell delay is calculated? Cell delay, that's a pretty basic function of input transition and the output mode, right? So so if I need to ask that what will be the delay of this cell 1 input to output arc, that delay will be proportionate to, that will be a function of the input transition that it is receiving as well as the output load, right? So more will be the transition, larger will be the delay. Larger cap that it needs to address at the output, more will be the delay, right? That's a pretty straightforward, you can say, the delay calculation. But again, this is simplified by the EDA tools. In actual, the formula will be pretty complex, but it is mapped inside the Liberty in the form of a tran or a cap function, right? Similarly, the output transition at the Z, at the output of the cell, is also a function of input tran and the output load, right? So that's how tool is kind of calculate every arc delay. For net delay, it is pretty straightforward. It's a RC network to be resolved by tool. For cell delay, it is more of a information coming from the library, modeled in the form of a input pin transition and the output load. It is just a sample set that we have shown, that is from the library, where you can see that the variable 1, that is input net transition, and the variable 2 is the output net capacitance, right? So over and above, there are indexes. So indexes 1 is for the input transition, and similarly index 2 is for the capacitance. Now it's a 2D table. You can assume that what will be the cell delay when the input transition is of 0.011 and the load of 0.002.7 femtofarad. The delay will be 0.231350, right? On the x-axis, your transition will be moving. On the y-axis, your capacitance will be moving, right? And by using this table, you can get the cell delay. You can map it from the library as well, that how tool is interpreting the cell delays. Okay. Although these are the very basic form of Liberty, these days we have POCV models, and those complex calculation of sigma is also introduced. So that could be maybe the out of course topics, but you can certainly go and explore how the sigma is now coming into picture and adding more complexities to this delay calculation. Okay. Again, so what do we mean by timing path? So see, inside your chip there will be millions of registers, there will be many input ports, and there will be lot of output ports, right? So in summary, you can see that the moment you will define your clock, right? So you can break all this design into components, into some set of signals. Each data path will be having a start point and an end point. So here in this diagram, how many paths that we can see is like when I say timing path, how many timing paths we can see is, it could be one flop to flop path, which is starting from reg 1, launch will is happening at reg 1 and captured at reg 2, right? That is one timing path we have. Similarly, there will be an input data that will be toggling, that is to be captured inside reg 1, right? That is path number 2, right? Similarly, there is a path number 3 where reg 2 will be launching data and it is going out, it is fed to the outside world, right? That's path number 3. Similarly, there exists another timing path which is input to output, where internal clocks has no role to play. That signal is just coming in and then going out. If we have certain requirement, right, that this in to out path should not be more than say X amount of picosecond, then we need to time that as well. So again, as a summary, you can imagine that every path has one start point and an end point. Start point, it could be an input port or a or a flop or a clock pin sequential device. Similarly, end point, it could be either output or the data input of the sequential devices, because that could be reg 2 as an endpoint, or it could be output, right? So basically, that's how we talk about a timing path. So here we have in this example we have 4 timing paths in this combination, right? Now let's talk about setup. So some of those interesting animation I thought of doing so that you can easily grasp those concepts. So setup, see, let's say that you have a data stored in flop A and there is data stored in flop B, right? That is, the moment the edge will come, the flop will will have a tendency to trigger the data going out to be captured in the subsequent flop, right? So by the time this second edge of clock comes, the data should be reached to the destination. That is what we claim it to be a setup check, that the data should be arrived before the next clock edge coming into the design, right? Now see that environment in the form of a timing waveform where your data is launched. I think just give me a minute. I think let me see if I can manage to have a pointer here. Yes, I think it is there in the secondary screen. Just give me a minute. Okay, yes, I got it. Okay. So basically where we were, so let's say that this is the first edge where the black edge was shown in the animation, and the second edge that will come after certain period of time, that is the red edges in the animation. So the data of all the flops is launched at this, and then the subsequent edge, every flop will receive a data, right? Even the flop A would have got a data from the previous flop, or it could be a port, right? And what we have just seen is that this delay from this to this, for every flop, it should be coming some requirement before the next edge, and this requirement is nothing but the setup time. Every flop will have certain threshold that I want every kind, any kind of toggling that I can sustain is before this kind of delay. That is my setup time before I could get another trigger, right? That is my setup time, right? Similarly, let's go to hold. Okay, so hold, I have tried to make a failure in this diagram. So let's say that the data A and B has the data in place. The moment you got the first edge, the data is going there, and then the next edge is coming, right? But here you can say again, please watch it again, that the data coming from A is reaching to B before B could forward that data forward, right? That means we have a tendency that path A to B has a hold failure because we were not having enough delays under this segment, right? We would like to delay the arrival of A data on B. We would like to delay it because what it otherwise did, it has corrupted the output of B, which was supposed to be landing to C, right? So it is a tricky, okay, one of these interview questions that we have quite often, right? That if there is a hold violation from A to B, which flop data will get will be corrupted. So it's not the data at B will be corrupted, but the data in the fan out cone of the B will get corrupted because there's a hold violation from A to B, right? So that means, and by that we would like to hold that data for some time within A and this combinational logic zone before this same edge data is able, this flop B is able to propagate it to C. So there will be a hold time for B. Let's say the B says that I need 500 picosecond of time before I could transmit this data out. That means this delay of A and this portion of logic should be, more than 500 picosecond, right? And by this concept, you must have realized that why we say that a hold timing check is a same edge check, right? Because this edge acted on the same time, and we would like to hold the data more than hold time after this edge, right? So this data should be coming after this particular hold time of the flop B, and that is the hold time. Okay, moving further. So again, that's what we discussed, that setup check will be from first edge to the second edge, while a hold check will be from the same edge, right? For the A to B, same edge check. Now moving to setup and hold. So again, one of the important requirement is that whatever we are talking is in reference to a clock, right? We can't model timing between any of the asynchronous clock. Let's say that there is no relationship between clock 1 and 2, right? They are asynchronous. There is no correlation. But what timing tool usually do is it will automatically detect one of those most critical conditions for setup and most critical condition for hold. See, here you can see that there is a division between clock 1 and 2, right? Somehow, tool is able to map one of the edges as aligned edges. Maybe so this edge is aligned, this edge is aligned, and with respect to, so again, so those edges which are aligned, it is able to synchronize the waveform. But even in that case, you see, every clock, even if it's asynchronous, will be starting from 0 as a reference, right? With that reference, tool will have multiple setup and hold arc being timed within the timing tool. It could be from this rise edge to this rise as well, from this rise edge to this rise as well, rise edge as well. So what it will do, it will automatically time to the most pessimistic setup and most pessimistic hold valuations in the design. Okay, not for hold. So it will automatically time every setup, and for every setup there will be a hold. And then this diagram, you can see that this is the default setup check and this is the hold check. And then if the clocks are not synchronous, you will start seeing very big violations in the design, because tool will still assume them synchronous and will try to figure out some relationship. So the most pessimistic one will be reported as a setup and the hold failure. Now this is another example, which is from a let's say my clock 1 is slower. In the example above, clock 1 is faster and the clock 2 is slower. Let's say an example where the clock 1 is quite slow and the clock 2 is fast. Even then, tool will do the same thing. It will simulate all the possible setup edges. So most pessimistic setup is this, and the most pessimistic hold is this, right? It will not time the future edges for the hold. It will time the next subsequent edges for the hold after it got set up. Okay. Again, being pessimistic, will get the most pessimistic setup and the hold combinations being checked within the tool. Okay. Now, what is recovery and removal, and how it is important? Okay. So see, you have millions of flops in the design. The moment you are starting to do something, right, there will be a reset coming into the picture, right? A lot of flops. Every flop in the design will be getting a reset, right? Let's assume that this is your waveform, which is like a clock running. Right now, you have not started doing any simulation or any data transfer. It is the reset which is coming into picture. And see, reset is a position where it will reset all the flops of the design. But as soon as you will lift the reset of those flops, every flop will starting to act, right? See, there is no start of a chip. There is no button of start again. So when you say there is no start or a stop button, basically what do we mean by that start button is, reset the chip and start a procedure, right? So it is very important. Again, reset entry, it is fine, right? If any of the flop is getting a reset at time t1 or the second flop is getting after some seconds. But the moment you are lifting a reset, that means you are telling your chip now you can begin, right? So the lifting of that reset of the whole design should not be random and should not be spread across your timing windows. You can't let your some of those flops are active under this edge and the remaining flop are active under this edge, right? That will be causing overall system failure while all the flops are coming out of reset at the different time. Because as soon as one flop gets out of the reset, it will start acting, right? That is why there could be reset arrival in your design to all those flops, but you want it to be retained within one clock window. And similar to setup, that's what we call recovery, that all the flops in the designs should get reset deassertion before this recovery time, just like we have a setup requirement. Similarly, there's a hold requirement that a flop which is getting the reset earliest should be at least be getting after a removal time of the previous edge. So fundamentally it is same like a setup and a hold, but the need is different, the timing path entirely is different. Here it will be a sequential check, it will be a flop queue to the reset pin of the flop that is being checked for the same concept, and those are termed as recovery and removal, right? And I just explained the application of that as well. Why do we need a reset mode? Okay. Again, basic idea is to have all the registers to come out of reset in the same clock cycle. And usually we have many millions of flops in the design. Now how it can be achieved is during the reset, the frequency of the device are supposed to be slow. So usually the resets are deasserted at a frequency of some 50 megahertz clock. Once it is out of reset, then the clock switchover happens to the main high frequency clock. Okay. Now let's talk about clock gating check. So again, as a fundamental, clock gatings are done to save power in the design. The clock trees are one of those cells which are heavily consuming the power, and we would like to, again, as an example, we don't want our mobile battery to drain out in 2 hours or 3 hours, right? Every chip component there inside a mobile is consuming power. Similarly, it's also applicable for a car standing, in the lock position, where that is for the time being it is working on your batteries. You can't remain. You can't leave your music system on with your battery there. It will drain out in like 4 to 8 hours, right? So again, from there, I can just linking those application to the check that every clock which is consuming the power inside your design is supposed to be gated. Now, while we are gating, that means we are temporarily shutting down the clock, and whenever in need, we are enabling the clock again, right? And then this enabling or disabling the clock should always be glitch free. See, remember, while checking setup and hold, we are ensuring that there is no glitch in the D cone of the flop, right? But we also need to ensure that there should not be any glitch in the clocking cone of the flop, right? There are clocking sources which are generating clock, sending it to the flop, but then there are gating elements as well that can lead to some glitch at the output of the clock gating, and that can feed to flop CK. Now, this is an example of AND type gating. Let's say I have an AND gate where I would like to gate this enable by this enable generated from another flop. Now, let's say that this is the clock, and this is an enable feed by the flop as it is programmed. Now you can see the moment I'll AND these two signals together, there will be a glitch in the system, right? We can't afford to have these kind of glitches going to the flop. That means you can see that the enable should not be coming here, right? Even it should not be coming here. Basically, it should never be coming during the rise sense of the clock. And the moment it is coming while the clock is falling, right? And then disabling again at the fall level, there will be an exact pulse you will be getting, right? Similarly, assume that these enabling and the disabling phases are well shifted, so you will have a temporary clock oscillating here, and then will be gated when it is not needed. Important point to note here is this enabling or disabling for the flop while the gating is AND type should be done always while the level is low. That is the AND type clock gating, right? And to ensure that so while let's say the enable is triggered here, it should be coming before this cycle, this edge. That's like a setup check. And then enable should always be coming after this fall edge, and to have that, this inverter is a must inside. When there's an AND type gating, it should be an inverted clock, otherwise there will be a glitch, right? This enable should always be coming after the fall edge. That is why this is a negative edge flop driving the enable of an AND gate. to avoid glitch, right? That's the perfect example of enable and the ECK clock generated. Similarly, for an OR type gating, the fundamentals are reversed. For an OR type gating, the usually, it is for the active low kind of a signal where we would like to, when enable going low, that means it is enabling the design. When enable is high, that means it is, the clock is disabled. So for such implementation, the OR type gating is used, and because it's OR type, it is in the reverse fashion. It should be triggered by a positive edge clock, and it should always be enabled or disabled during the rise edge of the clock, right? Just opposite to AND type gating. So that is why, if you see, the important thing from the ST angle is we need to meet the setup and hold condition here with the flop. The enable flop, which is enabling the system, is acting as a start point, but as a capture, this OR gate is a capture. Assume this OR gate like a flip flop where this enable and in the CK has a race condition to met. That is nothing but the clock gating check. Similarly for AND gate, right? We need to time it from the negative edge flop, that is start point, and the AND gate input is the end point. Okay. Now min pulse width. See, every library which is designed, every flop which is designed, they have a requirement. So a flop to be able to work at a high frequency, it is it is expecting a pulse. That the pulse, there will be a pulse. If the pulse will be shorter, of a very shorter duration, flop will not be able to recognize it as a as a trigger. That is why we have a requirement that there has to be a duty cycle, there has to be a clock ratios managed efficiently for a flop to work, and this requirement will be coming from the library team, from the library of the flop, the designer of the flop, that I need minimum of this rise and the fall, right? So why there's a difference in rise and the fall delays and what we can do to make it better, all these you can consider as a homework, after this whole session. I mean, something related to PMOS, NMOS variation, and all those extra ways of optimizing min pulse width that can be considered as a further studies. But here we are talking about the requirement. There's a min pulse need for every clock, right? That's what we also need to manage apart from setup and hold. Then let's talk about latency. So see, you will understand that if you have millions of flip flop in the design, right? Assume that you have one single source, one single PLL. It has to trigger the complete design where you have million of flops. How that clock will be reached to the individual endpoint, right? That signal will be lost if not buffered properly, right? You need to buffer it so that the transition sense, so that the min pulse width requirement is still managed. The transitions are good. While the signal is reaching from here to the flop CK, the signal are not drastically going down in terms of the delays. You will buffer it, and the moment you will buffer it, every flop in the design will be getting the clock triggered after some time equivalent to these delays, right? If you add up to all these delays, that's how your reference. So at the source, your reference of edge is here. As soon as you consider the delays of these buffer, your edge is shifted from here to here, right? That's how the timing diagram will move, right? The flop PLL has given the clock here, but the flop triggered at this edge, not at this edge. This is equivalent to the latency. Similarly, the flop after this trigger, flop will launch. There will be a capture flop which will also be getting some delayed clock, and that latency of capture and the latency of launch, it could be different depending on the buffers it has, right? So the delay of all these buffers, we claim it to be it is termed as latency. And then moving to the next slide, where we are talking about skew, right? Every flop will not get clock at the same time. There will be differences. These differences are claimed as skew, are termed as skew. And then skew could be positive or negative. All these things are just for reference. So if you talk about setup, anything which is giving you advantage, you will would like to call it as a positive thing. So for setup, the moment I will introduce more delay to this capture flop, the overall expectation of that edge will get shifted. I can have more delays over here, right? It is helping for my setup timing. At the same time, this will not help me for hold, because for hold the requirement will become more. I need to add more and more delays to meet this hold, right? So help setup but degrade hold. Similarly, you can call a skew as a negative where the launch flop is more delayed compared to capture. This will help hold but degrade setup, right? So skews are to be managed in the design, and need to ensure that despite of all these millions of flops getting the clock at a different time, your setup and hold is met, right? So we are slowly, moving to more complexities within the implementation as we are going through these slides, right? How it was simple flop to flop path, now it has more skew latency. Let's go further. There will be OCV and D8s also landed there. Now, before going there are timing loops in the design, right? So assume that we have a clock source 1, we have a clock source 2. There are two possible clock sources, and I have just shown you one of more complexities added to the clock tree. So let's say that I have a use case 1 where this clock 1 will be active, right? So all these flops in flop A will be getting clocked from here, and the flop in the clock B will be going from here. So all the timing path, let's say there's a launch happen from A goes to B, right? The acting clock is this, so the launch latency is this, the capture latency is this, and then there will be a capture. Now, as I said that it is STA, static timing behavior. I don't want two different modes. In one mode I will time one clock 1, and in another STA mode I will time clock 2. I would like to time it together. So I have defined clock 1 as well as I have defined clock 2, right? During and now the moment clock 2 is active while the clock 1 is not active, my timing path is the flop A will get clocked from here, and the clock B will get clocked from here, and then there will be path, right? So STA constraints will be able to manage both the clocks, but while implementation of synthesis tool will get confused. So we need to break this timing loop. For the time being, we need to manage the optimization. So we'll be breaking this timing loop here. The tool don't get confused that which is start point, which is end point, right? Usually the primary reason of breaking such loop is because while we are merging multiple use cases into one, right? So that's why it is to be broken. Now talking about more advanced concept where we call things as signal integrity. Signal integrity is nothing but you can say a coupling coming from the adjacent net to a net, which can help us which will cause setup or a hold violation. And let's see, and it could also cause the functional problems as well. For example, when we say there's a glitch noise, it can cause functional failure. Let's assume that this signal 2, it is supposed to be static, just like a steady state, and that it is all steady, right? This flop is not getting any signal because there is no transition involved. Now there is a aggressor, so the net which can affect your path is claimed to be aggressor, and the flop which is getting affected is called as victim, right? So let's say there's a very sharp transition on this particular red net which is lying adjacent to this flop net. This may simulate some sense of transition in this net, and this could lead to a temporarily toggling of this design, and this flop, which is supposed to be remain at a level say 0, will now go 1 for a shorter duration of time, and it can change the functionality inside this flop, right? So this is the functional glitch, and it could cause functional failure as well, right? Similarly, if there is a aggressor where the signal is going down, it can make that value 1 temporarily to a 0, and this is also claimed to be a glitch failure in the design. Now let's talk about delay noise. So see here, this one of the signal was static, was getting corrupted by a signal which is toggling. Let's say that there are signals toggling together, let's say in the same direction, right? So this signal was supposed to be having certain transition. There is an aggressor net. When I say aggressor, it is having a very aggressive transition, very much adjacent to this flop. What it can do is it can make this transition sharper, so that see the moment I'll make the transition sharper, the delay of this cell 3 will automatically get reduced. The moment it gets reduced, it can cause a hold violation over here, right? Similarly, let's say that there is a signal, there's another portion of the design where the adjacent net is acting in the opposite direction. The transition is in the opposite direction, which can delay the overall transition of this net, leading to which the delay of the cell 3 will increase, and there will be a setup failure in the design. So we also need to simulate the adjacent nets in the form of a coupling capacitance, which is also managed, that coupling capacitance information from the adjacent nodes is also part of the RC network and will be part of your SPEF. And tool will be able to simulate them as a impact of delay noise, and we need to ensure that despite of these aggressors, whether we are holding on certain or not. Okay. Okay. Further, so we have a corner definition. So I think we discussed, right? We have certain environmental condition around us, not us, I mean the chip while it is working. So while fabrication, the process could be very bad, and usually it is expected to be the outer line of the wafer, right? If you have not seen a wafer, wafer is a circular thing where you have small chips. So okay, there's a slide showing that wafer kind of a diagram where the individual chip is further cut out of that wafer. From a wafer, it could be 100 to 300 chips that can be extracted from one wafer, right? So when the wafer has a process involvement, that all the processes includes the spinning of that wafer wheel, and the chips at the boundaries of the wafer are supposed to be worse. I mean, it's not a directly saying that all the outer zone will be worse or the center zone will be best. I mean, there are more and more complications involved. Calling a chip to be a best case or a worst case processes. The idea is how granular, how those dimensions of W by L or those PMOS and NMOS are laid out in the process that defines a good process or a bad process. So usually when we say the good process means all these dimensions are cut very sharp, and the overall there's a good amount of current that can be passed through those channels. That means that is result into a lesser delays of the cell. So be it a net or a cell delay, when the process is very good, we claim it to be that yes, the overall delay will be very fast. The delays will be less, right? Similarly, voltage. See, just like we have discussed that there will be a clock source, it will be feeding to so many flops in the design that will add to the latency, right? And like different latency that will add to skew. Similarly, assume that you have very limited voltage sources in your design. In your SOCs, there will be one or two islands of voltage that will be through a power network. It will be feeding those supplies to all the flops in the design. But because of these network structure, not every flop will get voltage of same level, right? Now, the moment we get voltages, different voltages for different flop, there will be differences in the delays. And now overall, let's say that my regulator, which is a supply provider to all those flops, can have a it can have a swing. Some of those flop will get a voltage very less, or some of those flop will be getting higher voltages. But then there has to be a band under which we can we can assume the chip to be working. So if higher the voltage is landing to the cell, the delay will be lesser, and the more will be the voltage. The less will be the voltage, there will be more delays. Right? That is the impact that we have seen. Now, similarly on the temperature, it's again the older formula. Lower the temperature, lesser will be the delay. So when we say and the temperature is high, the delay will be more. But there's a star to that. We'll come to that star. This is as per the high nanometers claim. As we move to the lower technologies, there's a concept called temperature inversion. Okay, I'll come to that. So again, this PVT defines the libraries, right? Defining the library corner for us. So let's say that my chip can work under these extreme of PVTs, and there could be another extreme of PVTs. So my libraries, which are claiming the delay of every cell, will be, there will be multiple libraries for a multiple PVT condition, and we need to do timing sign off across all those libraries. Similarly, there will be RC extraction. So see, all the layers of your design, all those wafer will have multiple layers, which will be contributed to your net delays. Not all the processes, all the layers will be laid out in a symmetric fashion, or will be to the best processes. So there could be variation, and that will define your RC corner. There will be a PVT corner, there will be a RC corner, RC network corner. So a combination of those corner, process, and the RC, that will define multiple delay corners where we need to define, where there will be a variation in the delay of a net as well as a cell. That means those delays will be varied, And then we need to ensure that across all these delays, our setup and hold is also met. There will be multiple environmental conditions, right? We will be doing timing sign off from corner 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, these could be as high as 16 to 20 corners per timing mode. So if we have say 10 STA modes to be signed off across 20 corners, so assume that we have to run 200 such environments under which we will be doing the timing sign off of the complete design, right? Again, I mentioned it as a comment that in the lower technology nodes, 40 nanometer and the lesser, the fundamental gets reversed. That not cell delay, not net delay, but the cell delays with lesser loads, that lower the temperature, higher the delays are there because of the randomness behavior of the electrons. That is temperature inversion. Okay, STA modes. So STA modes, right? So I think we just talked about that there will be multiple functionality in the design. Functional mode 1, 2, and then there will be DFT modes as well. Scan mode, scan, MBIST, LBIST, ATPG. I think add speed and shift will be part of scan mode. There will be multiple conditions under which we need to model the STA. These are all defining the different STA modes, and they will be different by clock source definition. Similarly, for case analysis, I think we have talked about those required case analysis. See, case analysis nothing but the definition of the constant. If the constant 1 will be there, it is configuration 1. If the case analysis 2 is there, the chip is working in the if the case analysis 0 is there, the configuration 2 is valid. So we will be dealing with the combination of constant values propagating in the design as well as the clock sources. So the combination of which will be defining a mode. Okay. So we need to do timing sign off across all the modes and all the corners that we just talked about. Now, possible surprise question, and we may have just one person who can answer. I couldn't see the responses, so so out of this A and B, what would be the worst corner for setup? Right, we just discussed. So again, sorry, I mean in our current mode of communication, let me answer that for you because I couldn't see the hand raised. So again, as we say, worst corner for setup will be where my delays will be higher, right? My delays will be larger. The process is worst, the voltage is less compared to this one, and the temperature is high. So A will be more critical. So this PVT is more critical for setup, and this PVT is more critical for hold. When we say more critical, that doesn't mean we will not be checking setup and hold on the other one. We will be checking it on all the modes and all the corners. Similarly, for hold check, you would like to see a corner which is very good and that will give very less delays, right? The process is best, higher the voltages, lesser temperature. Yes, this is hold critical. The B1 is the hold critical. This one is setup critical. Okay. Now let's come to the environment of STA. So see, we have STA environment where we'll be reading that netlist along with the dot list to be able to complete the timing path. The connectivity of cell delay will be coming from the dot list, and the connectivity of the netlist will define A to B, B to C, those journey of a timing path. And then a parasitics file, which is in the form of a SPIF, will be defining the net delays, and then over and above as a top up, we'll be defining the timing constraints. That what is clock, what is constant, what is a false path, multi-cycle path. We will come to this portion after this, but that's one of the input. Then we also would like to define the environment, right? That it could be derates, operating condition. We'll come to these points. While operating condition, we meant the PVTs. That yes, my PVT is all defined properly. My timing derates, what it is, will come next. So we'll be ensuring that my environment is perfect. It is error free. There is no issues in that. And then we will again just those basic sanity checks are required, right? I am able to read all these things properly or not. We'll be verifying all those errors and warnings in the tool and the sign off settings, and then we will do a timing analysis. And what do we mean by timing analysis is timing each and every path which we discussed at the start and point for a setup and the hold, the glitch, the clock gatings or DRVs for transitions. So all those things, some of these things discussed, some of these things will come. We will do the timing analysis. Now, whenever we are, just attempting to fix a violation, like, oh, it's a setup violation, we should be fixing it. We should consider that whatever timing path we are trying to fix, is it really a valid path or not? Constraint validation will be there. All the net delays are properly annotated. Do we have any error or not? Again, whether this I mean, the constraints are valid means my clocks are defined properly, my exceptions are there, which are right. Then also asking if the path I am violating, is it really a valid path or not? Because in the static environment, you may see some timing paths which are actually not there in the design, right? It will be getting disabled because that whole configuration is not valid. So you will be checking it with the designers. We will also be checking that my skew is not giving me a problem. We'll be checking that yes, my all the flops are receiving those clocks within some time bound. It's not like a drastically open-ended skew definition we left before we are fixing the data path for the setup or for hold, right? Then we will be identifying the critical elements in the design where the transitions are very bad, set delays are very high. We'll be fixing them. We'll be checking for some high transitions and the higher loads where we would need buffering, right? Or upsizing those cells. That's how we'll be fixing setup. Okay, all these points. Now fixing time problem. Like again, as an example setup, right? There's a flop sitting here, being captured over here. This path is taking a lot of delays. What worst we could see is it's a long net. The output slew is very bad. The reason is this flop 2, this net is very long. The output load is very high. Because of this output very high, this load is very high, the cell delay F2 is very bad. Because the because of this higher load, the output slew is very bad. That output slew is also feeding, further degrading because of RCs and reaching to 3. And this cell delay 3, despite of the lower capacitance, it is getting a very bad transition. Right? So the delay of 3 is also very high. Now what we could do is, we can either upsize the cell, we can change the drive strength of the cell to, we can put a better, bigger cell, which can end up, fastening this transition. That this cell will have an ability to manage these higher loads. It can sharpen the transition. This upsizing will reduce the delay of cell 2. Similarly, we can even, upsize the cell 3 so that despite of the bad transition, it can generate a better delay. Or another fix could be, add a buffer in place, add a buffer in between. One can question that this buffer will also have its own delay, but you can see that overall new cell delay 2, 4 plus 3 will still be quite less compared to the older cell delay of 2 plus 3. Right? That's what these are those best practices that we attempt while fixing the setup, right? And even then there is no scope. You can think of pushing this flop further by adding buffers to its clock pin so that you can create more room if you cannot meet by these 3 processes for setup, right? But that is not recommended because as soon as you push this flop further, there will be another flop talking to this pin, right? Another flop through this pin talking to this flop. The moment you push it, there will be a hold violation in this path, right? So you need to be, sure about all the combinations of setup and hold criticality while suggesting the fix. Similarly for a hold, let's say that this is the flop sending data to all these 3 flops, and we need to add more delay because there is a hold violation. Let's say all these 3 flops are violating by hold, right? So what tool can do is either it can add a different delays of cells depending on the amount of hold violation, or that is not an efficient way of fixing it. We can think of downsizing a cell. Like for setup, we upgraded the cell. We can downgrade the cell so that the delay of this portion increases. That means an equivalent increase in the delay to all these 3 segments, and the hold is met. Even if it is not, we can even think to add a buffer at the source. Most easiest and you can say most efficient fix, one cell fixing hold to all these 3 endpoints, right? More better fix compared to the other. Okay, so SDF, I'm just keeping it short. SDF is nothing but from the timing environment, we are dumping out a file where we are just informing what is the delay. So for a delay, we need from this to this node, delay 1, from this output to this input, delay 2, from this input to this output, delay 3. We are just telling the verification tool, which is doing a dynamic simulation, where it is actually passing 1, receiving some 0, forwarding 1. We are just adding that sense. We are just telling tool, assume this delay, assume this delay, assume this delay, right? Don't spend your time in doing delay calculation. It is done by the timing tool. This is the SDF, read it and then run. That is gate level simulation. along with timing with SDL, right? That's what we meant by GLS. Okay, now important early and late concept in the design, right? Remember we discussed the static nature of the tool, right? So you will have multiple combinations of delays in your clock path because of muxing. Similarly for the capture path, similarly in the data, there will be thousands of hundreds of paths between the two flops. But the moment I would like to time setup, right? What I want is I want this flop to be pushed to its limit because that will be most critical for setup. I want this data to be as highest as possible. Again, right, that is going by the nature of static. If I'll fix it for this, all remaining paths will automatically be clean, right? That is the intention. Similarly, for this capture clock, I would like to pull it as much as possible. I'll be using the least delays. So in my design, tool will by default show you this most critical path, telling that if you meet this, other hundreds of paths within those interaction will automatically be clean. Right? I don't care about the rest. I'll show you the worst. Similarly for hold, it is this way, right? You will be pulling this flop as much as early. You will pull the data as much as early, and you will push the clock as much as you can. That's how we'll time hold. Right? Okay. Now we just talked about early and late concept, right? These early and late concepts are there because we are talking about early, late, derates. Now in a single mode where the verification tool will not be going for the worst and the best delays. It will simply say delay. It will be either worst for all the cells or it could be minimum for all the cells. These are the single modes where tool will not do any early or late practices. It will just go all cells as late or all cells as early. So these are not used for sign off. For sign off, we use OCV mode. When we say OCV mode, we just discussed, right? I'll be using early and the late concept. Similarly, that early and late is also propagated for propagating the transitions. See, assume this cell. This cell is having a transition coming from here and then from here. Now at the output, this transition will be a function of this arc as well as a function of this arc. But I will choose that the transition at the output. See, despite the fact that I'm timing it from flop A to flop B, if the transition at this node is very bad, there's a probability the output transition at the output will also be bad. The transition at this output will not be coming from here. The transition will be again coming as worst from the bad signals. Right? I'll be propagating the worst slew and will be getting the worst delay for these cells when I'm timing it setup. When I'm timing it for hold, I'll get the best slews. Let's say there's a delay, there's a slew of 100 PS, here the slew is 20 PS. While I'm timing hold, we will say, let's say the output slew will be 30 PS because it's dependent on this 20 PS, not on this 100 PS. So that is the pessimistic nature of the tool that will allow it to act as static. This is the OCV. So that's how the transition will propagate. Similarly, I'll come to derate. Now coming to the OCV derate, see, I think this is what we talked about. There's a wafer, right? Out of this wafer, there will be n number of chips. So while we are saying that there's corner 1, there is corner 2, there is corner X, Y, we are talking about the whole chip working in those PVTs. But within that small chip, there will be different cells. It is also possible that this cell is best, this cell is worst. It is also possible that this PLL will be giving some voltage to this, some different voltage to this. Similarly for temperature, the temperature here is different, right? So those variation which are within the chip, again, here it is one chip to another chip. I think this chip will not talk to this chip. So it is not what they are talking to each other. They should be timing clean at the extreme multiple PVT corners, but within one chip, there will be variation possible in the delays. So that's what we modulate with derates. So derates, for simplicity, let's assume that there is some percentage that we want to add as a pessimism, that I don't know about the exact value of this PVT, but I have done enough of simulation. I understand that my path can be either speed up by X percentage or can slow down by some X percentage. These two X can be different. It could be X or a Y. So assume that while I'm timing, setup, for timing setup, I would like to time this as delay as possible. So the delay plus some additional X percentage of delay, I will be delaying it. Similarly, I'll be delaying my data, but my capture path, the delay will be shrink by this X percentage to be able to model these within silicon simulations variation as well. This is nothing but the OCV delay. Similarly, while I am timing hold, the situation will get reversed, right? I'll say, let's make this path early by y percentage. The delay will also be early. Similarly, the capture path, let it be pushed by some y percentage. Let me go pessimistic and assume the worst condition for setup and hold. That's why we are using OCV delays to model the intra-die variation. Right? These PVD corners are chosen to cover the inter-die variation, and these OCV delays are used to avoid intra-die variation. Okay. Now CRPR. Now what is CRPR is? See, I think we just discussed that we will be applying a derate, right? Let's say I am applying plus minus 5% of derate. It is applied. Now there are cells within the common clock path, right? They cannot be at the same time plus 5 while they are launching the clock. They cannot be immediately go back to minus 5% while they're capturing the clock. So this is the extra pessimism added by the tool. The tool will say it is in the common clock path. Let me remove this. This is nothing but common clock path pessimism removal, right? Similarly for hold, right? For hold also, I'll remove it. It's not needed. We'll be only be applying this into the data path as well as in the uncommon clock path. This is CPPR, common path pessimism removal. Now CRPR is nothing but a similar concept, but it is on the reconvergence path in the clock tree path, right? Either this will be applicable or this will be applicable, but while timing setup, I would have considered this path in the launch and this path in the capture. But both of them cannot be acting at the same time. There will be some functionality of the chip, whether it's 0 or a 1. So I will be removing the differences in these delays in the clock path the way I'm using it for CRPR, CPPR. These are the two concepts quite oftenly used. Okay. Now, how to reduce the OCV impact of the design? Instead of here, you can see that these two flops are getting uncommon from these three, right? Avoid uncommon elements in the design so that the derate application can be reduced to these paths. That is the only way to reduce OCV impact, right? Reduce the uncommon clock tree path for the talking flops. That will reduce OCV. Okay. Now, okay, important topics, timing constraints. So these are the basic building blocks of timing constraints. You have clock definition, you have exceptions, and then you have IO timing constraints. How they are linked, we'll go and we'll see next, right? So this is the design, flop A, flop B. Nothing is defined while you begin things. You will define a clock 1. The moment you define a clock 1 will be propagated to the design. The moment you will define a clock 2, the clock 2 will also be propagated to the design. And then tool will understand, okay, this is a clock of 100 megahertz. This is a divide by 2 clock, divide by 2, that means this is 50 megahertz. So it is a path from 100 megahertz to 50 megahertz. And as a pessimistic edges, if you will map, this path will be timed at 100 megahertz. Right? Usually the sources of generated clock, it could be the output of the clock dividers, output of the clock gating cells where the division is happening by controlled by an enable, right? It could be marks based dividers where out of these two clocks, one of the clocks is to be going out, but we understand that we need to define a division, expect to 1, we will be defining that. Right? We talked about latencies, that there will be a buffer, but then how to model that? See, during the placement, while placement, these clock tree cells are not laid. These clock tree cells are not there. After the design is placed, later on the clock tree is done. Before that, you need to model it by using certain commands. When you say the set clock latency 2 on clock 1 and clock 2, that means yes, I am guaranteeing that while placement, these assume a latency of 2, which I will be making after CTS. So a stage of implementation we need to model during synthesis and placement in the form of a latency. That will be part of our constraints too. Okay. And then uncertainty, I'll tell you the role of uncertainty. But when we say there's a clock uncertainty for 200 PS, that means I want an extra pessimism in the setup requirement that shrink this path by additional 200 PS. That I can I can see, basically it's like a margin building on the design. Assume that you need to reduce this path by additional 200 picosecond because there could be noise at the later stage, which I'm not seeing right now, but I'll see once I'll route the whole design. So I'm just building some margin. So just building this margin is done by the set clock uncertainty command. Again, these are the multi-cycle path. as we just discussed, if there are, if the ratios are say like clock 1, clock 2 talking, we just discussed that there will be a default setup. This will be the default hold, right? And the moment I will say, let me define a multi-cycle path of setup of 2. The moment I say setup of 2 means relax the path of setup by 2. Instead of checking it at this edge, check it at the second edge. And the moment you will shift the setup, the hold will automatically be shifted to the early edge of the setup, that is this edge. But by design, we understand that the right edge will still be this. Now to model this, we need to add a multi-cycle path of hold 1. See, remember, these positive numbers will always relax your thing. See, this hold from here to here is a critical hold. It is telling that, I don't know, I want every such path to add a delay equivalent to 1 cycle to meet hold. This is very pessimistic. You can't meet it. You need to pull it back by saying no. By design, the hold check is here, the setup check is here. That's how the multi-cycle will operate. Okay. Again, it is getting more complex. We say there is a combination of slow to fast check, and you can say as a pessimistic behavior, tool will automatically get the worst of setup and the previous hold. And the moment you will define a multi-cycle path of 2, but note that this end step. When we say end, that means the clock 2 which is captured, that will have the phase shift. Instead of this edge, I am going to this edge, right? This is done so that because minus end is written over here. But if you will define a minus start, that means this clock from here will shift to this. See, the behavior of path will become different the moment you use start or end. You always need to specify this, and you always need to ask designer, right? An important point. Okay, very important. Okay, so what is the problem in meeting a non-zero cycle hold check? So we know that, right? Setup path, it is frequency dependent, right? If a path is met at 100 megahertz, it will be clean at 80, right? If a path is clean at 100, it cannot work at 120. But for hold, every path will become hold critical, and if we have a non-zero hold cycle check, it will become frequency dependent, and your chip cannot work on a lower frequency because hold is a same edge phenomena. So you should not have a non-zero cycle hold check in the design at all. Again, some food for thoughts. Think it. Post session. Okay. Timing exception. So timing exception is so timing exceptions are applied to mask a path because as a designer we understand these paths are not valid. We'll go to designer, we'll discuss it with them, and then depending on the discussion we understand, okay, this path is not valid, please put a false path. Mask those start and pair, those are not valid. So the moment we say set false path from clock 1 to clock 2, clock 1 to clock 2, this path is disabled. This clock 1 will not be talking to any of the flop in clock 2. But the moment we say let's have a false path from a register C to register B, this path will also not be working, right? The tool will not time these paths because you have told tool that this is a false path. Don't time it. Okay. Now how case analysis is making a difference. See, the moment again this is the circuit. Again, we need to confirm from the designer that these are the case analysis that I am applying, right? The moment you apply 0, right? The moment you apply 0, this path will not start timing. Reason is this leg from green leg going to A is not valid, and if it's not valid, this path will automatically not, this flop D will not get this green clock. This path will not be timed, right? The moment you apply 1, this path will not be talking, right? Because this cone is working on clock green, this is working on blue, but the blue is not propagating here. These are invalid paths. 2 different clock sources should not be timed, right? So you need to understand what is the real value of this flop, and if you don't, again by default it is supposed to be X. Let tool time all the path. Don't apply these case analysis unless you have a confirmation. Else you can also disable a particular arc, right? That I understand that this arc is not real. Let's disable it. I think we discussed it to be used while doing the timing loops. Okay. We will tell tool that disable this arc. It's not a valid arc. It will be disabled. Right? Now set max delays, min delays. There are portion of the design they are not linked. So all the flop talking to another flop is linked by a clock domain, but sometimes we don't get reference. For example, this flop A, this data A is going to data B. We can add a max delay from port A to B 3ns. Just meet this path from here to here at 3ns second. See, by default, there is no linkage. There is no reference, right? What is the reference of this start and what is the reference of this point B? There is no reference defined. So we are using set max delays. Similarly, the output, I don't know at what clock this will work. But now, while defining this, there will be a max delay that I'll be adding, and we'll be telling tool that model this flop to this C to this delays. Okay. Now SOC level IO timing constraints. See, assume that again, right? See, the moment you will define clocks, all the flops inside your design are talking to each other, right? But have you ever thought that how this flop or how this chip where inside this flop can talk to these ports, right? Because there's a chip too. While on the board there will be multiple chips talking to each other. So now those behaviors are defined by the IO delays. So while designing this chip, I will assume that this port will have certain expectation as per this clock, and I'll model this whole environment in the form of output delay. This port going out, I'll model this whole environment in the form of output delay. And similarly, while timing this chip, I'll model this whole information in the form of an input delay. While I'm manufacturing or doing timing closure of this chip B. So all these external environments are modeled in the form of IO timing constraints, where we'll be defining input delay, output delay. So let's see, so all this portion B and this portion C. Portion B will be defined as input delay. This input delay will be like A plus B arc, and the output delay will be this C, and the setup arc will also be a requirement, right? C plus D will be like output delay for this. While I'm simulating this design, I'll just add a reference clock, and to the reference clock we will give these delays. And you will see that virtually you are able to time this whole path from here to here, but through these input output delays. You have met this and external conditions as well. Right? Similarly, transitions. See, every cell delay for a delay calculation needs some input transition, right? But you don't know what is the external environment. So you will define those as a spec. You will tell your customer that I am assuming that this signal will not have transition worse than this or faster than this. Faster transitions are needed for your hold closure on these areas, and worse will be assumed for the setup closure. Similarly, your cells which are talking to the output port will also need to know that how much is the board routing capacitance, or your another chip will have certain loads, right? You need these external information. This information, this load at the output and this transition which is coming to the input is the input type. This is the information provided to this chip. This is the global constraints. Input type you will be defining as input transition and the output load. Now, while you are doing so, you also would like to give a commitment to your customer, right? That this guy, while assuming a delay for this B, will expect a load not more than some restriction, right? Similarly, for the output guy who is sampling your outputs will also assume certain transition that you will be not exceeding the transition beyond this. These are the constraint type global constraint that you will be putting on yourself, that I will not manage load more than certain things, and I will sending the sharper transition as output. These are the constraints that I'll be applying on myself. Okay. Uncertainty, we discussed that it will add pessimism in the design, and we will be adding uncertainties for the different stages of the design flow, because at synthesis we have many things are not defined, right? At synthesis I don't know what placement impact will be there. At CTS there will be skew impact in the design, right? At the routing stages there will be noise coming into the design, the signal integrity problem, right? So what we will do is we will model all these things in the form of a surprises. All these surprises we will be modeling in the form of uncertainty while I'm doing synthesis, right? How it is done? While I'm while I'm doing placement synthesis, I don't know what will be the skew. Let's say I'm assuming it to be 150. Let's say that the jitter is 50, and there are extraction issues that I'll get while I'm adding the actual net delays. There will be a OCV derate impact while my clock tree will be there. There will be some delay margin as well. So I will be doing timing closure at synthesis assuming these margins. The moment I go to CTS, I'll reduce skew because now I can see the real skew in the design. The moment I'll go to OCV stage, I'll reduce the OCV margin because now I have already applied those OCV derate along with the clock tree. So I'll see the real values. I don't need these margins. And the moment I'm going to routing stage, noise analysis, I don't know. I mean, I have the real values of these delays, adding to those paths. And these are nothing for the sign off. These jitters and the tool for sign off, you will go. You will only have jitter. So all the summary of this slide is what we will do is we will be keeping a higher uncertainty in the early stages of the design. As we go towards tape out, we'll be making it more realistic with more real data. Right? Again, surprise question: why hold is not fixed at synthesis at placement? Because you don't have visibility of skew. The clock tree is not yet laid out. Right? You don't know what will be the skew, how much will be the hold. There's no point in fixing hold. Right? Again, okay, so a quick summary on the hierarchical timing closure. See, assume that you have a big SOCs, right? All these small blocks of the SOCs will be implemented independently and then stitched to form a SOC. That's what we call as bottom approach. Top down, I have full clarity on my top level timing. Now I understand, but because of capacity issue, I'm dividing them into multiple pieces, and then I'll be simulating and implementing this whole design individually. And then later I will link them to have a flat sign off, right? Both these strategies are there as an application, but mostly it is used as a bottom approach because all those new SOCs which we are building are really dynamic. The definition always gets changed. And then, let's say that this IP, this portion of the logic got another customer requirement and we need to design it fresh. But we will not wait for this portion of the block. We will implement this design in the early phases. We will implement this, we will mature this design in the early phases. And then assume all these designs as independent SOCs, which will be stitched together. I think in the earlier slides, we have seen how a chip 1 will talk to chip 2. Now we are talking about one full internal design will talk to this design, and this design will talk to this design inside the chip, right? So we will be waiting for some critical IPs which are not frozen. We'll implement the rest of it. While it is done, we'll integrate it and then we'll do a tape out. This is quite effective, this bottom up approach. And then now remember, see, while I am modeling that I will do this block later stages, but I am still need to time this interface paths because I also would like to ensure that these interface timings are also met. What we'll do is we will use the budgeting method. Again, so what timing model we need is while doing the flat STA, flat timing sign off, I will have all the details of these blocks. But during the implementation phase, I don't know what is this block A and block B going to come. I will model it in the form of a dotlet. Right? 2 dotlets, netlist PEF, and these models are nothing but the reflection of the timing behavior of the block. Right? So QTMs, ILM, ETM, these are the common dotlet models, and I'll just explain you in a quick method that what is QTM, what is ETM. QTM is a quick timing model that is setting the expectation. So we have defined an input delay of 8 nanosecond, the output delay of 7 nanosecond that will be there in the external condition. I don't know about my internal design, but I'm sure that I can follow these to make my timing closure. Right? So my QTM will be assuming not this 3, because if my time period is 10, input delay is 8, I need to optimize this logic into 2, right? Only then my setup will be met, right? This plus this should be equal to 10. So assuming that I will be able to optimize within this 2 NS, I will tell the rest of the world that don't worry, I'll make it in 2. Similarly, my output delay is 7. I will ensure that this delay is not more than 3, right? Don't go by these current values because the designs are not yet done. It is in an immature. Right now, let me plan it for 2 and 3. I will release this model. Assume that this is a flop, this is a setup arc, this is a CK2Q arc. This model is given to the remaining SOCs, and while I have not even implemented this block, this model will be utilized for that guy. So this again, post CTS, don't go here. I mean, this is including these latencies, nothing. This 2 minus 3 will become -1. This 3 expected timing here plus 3 will become 6. So CTS is now also coming into picture, right? So these models, this will be consumed during placement, this will be consumed during CTS, right? So this will be consumed by the block, by the rest of the designs where this block is still implementing. See, the idea is we have delivered a lib model. Now you model it, you do your closure while I can do this thing independently. Similarly, ETMs are nothing but the design behavior. So forget timing constraint. We assume that this block is already completed. Now this is 3.5, so it will remain 3.5. Again, we have subtracted the clock. 3.5 minus 3 in the setup arc, this will get subtracted. Arc is 0.4. Forget output delay. I am done with the design. This will take 1 nanosecond only. So this 3 and 1 will take it 4. This is the ETM I will be releasing once I am done. While my maturity is pretty high, I'll use ETM, otherwise I'll use QTM, right? Again, these are nothing but a timing reference of the design. Okay, so last topic, virtual latency. It is very important. See, while you understand there's the input delay, output delay, but what is the reference of the clock, right? Every block you are doing independently will be having certain latencies, right? So this, again, when you are saying the input delay of this port is some XYZ, but it is supposed to be with respect to some signal, but that with respect to some clock is not there in your design, right? How you will link it? The problem is resolved by the concept of virtual clock latency. For example, you assume that this port will be feeding by a flop. Again, this is an assumption. Will be fed by a flop that will have a clock same as latency of this your block. So you will use one virtual latency for timing reg to out as well as into reg path of the design. Now see what will happen. You have this block 1 with a virtual latency of 2. I mean, virtual latency 2 means this flop while talking to out, it assume 2, while talking from the input port, assume 2. Similarly, this block is at a latency of 1.8, its internal latency is around 1.8. This is another block at 1.2, and there is a flop which is sitting at the outside. You know, the remaining logic here, L. What you need at the end, you want to balance every flop inside this partition to this, to this, to this, right? We need to match the skew of the design. Assume that this flop which is sitting outside get a latency of L, and this block assume latency 1.8, right? So you just need to feed this portion of the logic to that clock to L minus 1.8, right? So that this total will become L, this total will also become L, and this total will also become L. So that while in the flat environment, every flop in the design will be getting triggered at the same time. That is why when you close this block, assuming some virtual latency of input output delay and your boundary setup and hold is closed, and while this will be talking to this flop, this block, where the flop also close a design, assuming certain delays, this flop to flop path will automatically will be clean, right? That's how the clock tree planning is done for the hierarchical design. Okay. So these are those complex topics I thought of also covering while we are taking you from the very basic to the very advanced level of STA. So I think recently what we just talked about is how the bigger chips are made while these blocks are done independently. So again, remember, again, it's not STA. The timing is very important in every aspect of life. And best of luck. I hope that you will meet all your setup in your life, hold the credibilities, and all what we work is for a higher yield and yield a great level of success in your life. Okay. So that is the last slide of the presentation. And any quick question I can take. I mean, I see that the time we have a couple of minutes, but we can definitely take 1 or 2 questions for sure. I'm just switching to the okay, here it is. Yeah. Okay, so Sai Vijay has a question.
Actually, when you the CTS, I mean, is there any method to get a list of registers where the insertion delay is very large?
Yes. See, in the tool, you have commands for reporting the latencies of all the flops. See, you can create a matrix. So there is a CTS dashboard that is also can be generated where you can club that within 7 nanosecond to say 7.5 ns how many sync are there. There will be a bracket created that from 8 ns to 9 ns these are the latencies of the flop. So all those information is very handy that can be extracted from the tool.
Can you come again? What is the command for that to get all?
Report log latency, will be listing all those flops with the latency, but then you can, automate a process around that to make a skew diagram. You can create a histogram. May not be a straightforward command available, but yes, some automations are needed over and above.
Okay, thank you.
It will report latency of individual endpoints.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Sir, as per STA, DFT topics, sir, what are the important topics to refer in DFT as per STA?
Okay, see, a DFT, I think scan shift, a basic fundamental of shift and capture, if you study. So shift is a a mechanism where I can feed every flop to a value. Then I will allow tool to switch to the next edge, and then that is a capture cycle. And then I'll extract all the information of those flop out, and I'll compare whether this is what I was expecting to know which flop is actually having a silicon problem. So basic fundamentals around shift and capture, that will be the basic need of defining a mode, right? So understand the functionality of DFT by going to the fundamentals of shift and capture. Yep. Hi Sai, you have another question?
Sir, ATPG is required as per DFT. ATPG scan chains.
Right. What is the question, Sai?
Sir, scan chain ATPG are really required for STA.
Yes. See, again, as we explained that ATPG is nothing but your add speed simulator, where in DFT they will simulate every functional path. We validate the functionality of the design before we hand over the chip to customer. So ATPG capture is equivalent to your functional mode, while to make that capture happen, you also need to be able to program all the flop through the shift mechanism. Okay, again, it is required for testability. We would like to toggle every node inside design, be it a combination logic as well as a flop, and ensure that it is not stuck to a value. It is also able to perform at that frequency what we are committing to customer, right? That's what we'll be checking.
Oh, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So do we have any tool where we can practice this STA so that we have a hands-on on this topic?
Okay.
Any free?
Okay. See, I could see that these days a lot of blogs are available for the fundamental understanding, but I suppose that Synopsys also have that university linkage where Synopsys and Cadence, both the EDA companies, offer you some sample limited tool set where you can ask for a download and you can install it. I mean, I'm not sure, we need to check, but yes, I think there are university linked programs. They can give you some live sessions that you can download and you can run it at your end.
No, but sir, I want to practice actually. You're talking about the blogs. I want to practice on a tool.
Okay. Again, I think it is more of a scope that we have. I mean, with university linkages with these EDA industries where you can access these tools for your practice. For fundamentals, I think there are lot many blogs are available online. And again, what we just explained is in nutshell of what we have been doing in STA. Just pretty basic fundamentals that we touched.
Yeah, thanks Atit for the presentation. I think we are already over time. And I believe that there are still many questions that need to be answered. So for the people who want, who have some more questions, please send your mail on LinkedIn to us, and Atit will respond to them offline. And for those people in NXP, all of you know Atit, so you can send your emails directly to Atit, and he should be more than happy to respond to them.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for the participation, and hope to see you, all of you, in next presentation. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.